Hey guys, tonight we start your day the Victorian way. No, not with a warm shower and a cup of coffee, but with a scratchy flannel, a cracked basin of cold water, and a strict set of rules about how clean is too clean. You're waking up in a narrow, chilly bedroom, its single window sealed tight with cloth to block out the London fog. Or, as your aunt calls it, death in the air. The sheets are a little damp. Not because you sweated, but because dampness is simply everywhere. You kick off the itchy wool blanket, rise stiffly in the dawn light, and step onto the frayed rug with bare feet that you'll later regret exposing. Before doing anything else, you head to the tiny washstand in the corner, where a pitcher and bowl wait for your ablutions. But don't get too excited. There's only enough water for one person. 2 at most, if you're clever. And no, it's not hot. There's no running water in this house, and heating it on the stove just for washing would be an outrageous waste of coal. The water in the jug has been sitting since last night, and it's slightly cloudy, having already been used to rinse someone else's hands, or possibly feet. You dip your cloth into the bowl and scrub your face quickly, avoiding the eyes, then your neck, then your underarms, though only lightly. You've been warned that too much scrubbing will damage the skin and encourage illness. That's not a superstition. That's what the Ladies' Manual on Domestic Hygiene says. One of many rules passed down like scripture in this household. You wipe the back of your neck last, trying not to wince. The cloth smells faintly of mildew. But it's your cloth, so be thankful. Your older cousin must share with her sister, and their cloth is pink. Not by design, but because they once used it to wipe up a bleeding nose, and now no amount of boiling will restore its original grey. Soap is nowhere in sight this early. You're not expected to use it before breakfast. Washing the hands with soap spoils the appetite, or so says the housekeeper, who read that in The Mother's Friend, a popular household manual. There's a cake of carbolic soap locked in a tin box in the pantry, but you'll need permission to use it, and only if your fingers are visibly soiled. Your nails, you check them quickly. If they're clean enough to pass your aunt's thumb swipe test, a quick drag of her gloved thumb across your nail beds, then you're safe from her morning lecture. If not, it's back to the wash basin, and she'll stand over you while you use the rag again, muttering about young people and their fondness for dirt. You don't touch your hair yet. That's a separate ritual, with its own hour and its own brush. And you certainly don't think about brushing your teeth just yet. That's a midday or bedtime thing, done only if your breath offends someone important, or if you're courting. Instead, you get dressed quickly in yesterday's underclothes, button your high collar, and fasten your waist belt tight enough to look respectable. Smell? That'll be dealt with by a pomade or a scented scarf later. As you descend the stairs to breakfast, you pass your cousin wiping her nose on a corner of her sleeve. No one says a word. The handkerchief box is still locked in the dining drawer. It's only unlocked after tea. And remember, you're not dirty. You're fresh enough. That's the phrase the family uses. Fresh enough to eat porridge with. Because in this house, cleanliness isn't about comfort. It's about survival. Or at least looking just hygienic enough to avoid scandal. You sit down at the long, narrow table in the dining room, careful not to scuff the wood with your elbows. Breakfast is a silent affair, save for the clink of spoons and the soft crunch of toast that's more charcoal than bread. Across from you, your uncle unfolds the Times, oblivious to the dried ink smudges on his fingers. No one mentions them. It would be rude to draw attention to something as personal as another person's cleanliness. There's a faint scent of mothballs in the room, mingling with the leftover grease from last night's kidney pie. The curtains are drawn tight, not just for privacy, but because opening them might stir the bad airs. The family doctor once warned that early morning draughts could excite the lungs, and since then fresh air has been treated like an invading army. Your aunt finally speaks, just 2 words, barely above a whisper. Brush later. It's not a request. You nod. She's referring to your hair, of course, not your teeth. Hair comes before anything else in this house, and you'll do it at the dressing table under her supervision, using one of the 3 shared brushes. The family owns only one proper boar bristle brush. The others are older, the bristles splayed and stained with years of oil and powder. And here's the unspoken rule: never brush hair at the breakfast table. Not because it's unhygienic, though it absolutely is, but because it's vulgar. Victorian etiquette manuals are clear. Personal grooming is to be done behind closed doors, or at least behind a screen. You feel a bead of sweat trickle down your back, but you resist the urge to dab it away. Dabbing implies awareness, and awareness implies shame. Better to act as if it isn't there. The youngest child is scolded for sneezing without excusing himself. Your aunt insists sneezes expel invisible filth and should be treated like impolite emissions. He wipes his nose with his sleeve. Again, no one offers him a cloth. You glance at the door, wondering if it's too early to slip into the scullery and splash your face again. But that would mean touching the pump handle, a crime punishable by a lecture, and perhaps even the dreaded kitchen rag treatment, which is exactly what it sounds like. So you wait. The morning continues with a strange rhythm of silence, movement, and unspoken restraint. You learn quickly that hygiene isn't about freshness, it's about optics. It's about avoiding the appearance of slovenliness while conserving as many resources as possible. Because in this household, cleanliness is a performance. The basin must look clean, the rag must look unused, the hair must appear brushed, the breath must smell neutral, not fresh, just unoffensive. You help your cousin carry the chamber pot to the window alcove where it sits behind a decorative screen, waiting for evening disposal. You both hold it with one hand and pinch your noses with the other, but no one speaks of the smell. That would be vulgar. And so the day continues, cloaked in rituals, driven by rules and stitched together by a polite silence so thick it muffles even the creak of the floorboards. Tomorrow will begin the same way. Same rag, same basin, same struggle to feel clean without looking like you're trying to be clean. And still, no one has touched a bar of soap. You return to your room later in the morning, summoned by a soft knock and a louder command. Change your linen. But don't misunderstand. They don't mean the sheets. That's for Mondays, and only if the weather's dry enough to hang laundry in the yard. What they mean is your underthings. The layer that sits closest to your skin, absorbing every drop of sweat, every whisper of last night's dream, and every trace of whatever clings to the backs of chairs, stair rails, and Uncle's dandruffed coats. Your linen is folded neatly at the foot of the bed, same as yesterday's, and the day before's. Not a fresh set, just a designated set. You're expected to reuse your underclothes for days, even a week or more. The reason? Frequent washing ruins the fibres, says the housekeeper, but the truth runs deeper. Soap is expensive. Water must be hauled. Firewood must be burned. Laundresses must be paid or bullied. So the solution is simple. You, not your clothing, must adapt. You pull on your long flannel undergarment, careful not to tug too hard on the mended seams at the shoulder. It's warm, slightly itchy, and faintly sour around the waistband, where it sat crumpled after yesterday's wear. You know it's not fresh, but fresh is a luxury. You glance at your cousin's set on the chair, identical in cut but yellowed under the arms. She powders the stain each morning and hopes no one notices. There's a rule for this. It's never spoken, but everyone obeys it. If it's not soiled enough to be offensive, it's clean enough to wear again. And so it hangs in the air like a law, an invisible measure of when enough is enough. The only exception is visible discharge. Anything red, green, or crusted with suspicious grit warrants washing. Otherwise, it's just a whisper of you, something the linen should bear with dignity. You recall the horror story your aunt once told after dinner, a sort of Victorian urban legend, a girl who demanded clean linen every day. She was said to have died early from excessive self-regard and a weakened constitution. Her clothes were buried with her still white. Her name is never spoken. You try to push the image from your mind, but it clings like the flannel itself. Downstairs, the washroom simmers with mystery. There's a locked chest where the true clean garments are kept, reserved for Sundays or formal visits. They are starched, pressed, and free from scent. Sacred garments. And you'll wear them when the family's reputation requires it, not your own comfort. There's a peculiar irony to it all. The garments closest to your flesh, those that see the most of your body's truth, are given the least attention. The outerwear, impeccable, brushed, mended and checked for every stray thread. But your underthings, they must endure, because no one is supposed to see them, except for the maid who pretends not to, and if you're unlucky enough to be part of a household that employs a washerwoman rather than a live-in maid, things get worse. Those women report stains. They talk. Your linen could become gossip if washed too often, or too little. Imagine the whispers. She needed 3 changes this week. What is she hiding? Better to keep steady, predictable. 1 change every 5 to 7 days. Less in winter. None at all if you're ill. Because nothing says respectability quite like quietly suffering in the same underclothes for a week. You head down to the scullery mid-morning, where the laundry tub waits like a judgmental sentinel of all that's been hidden beneath clothing layers. You're not here to wash anything, not yet. You're just helping your aunt carry last week's bundle. It's wrapped in an old curtain tied with a fraying ribbon, and God forbid you let the linen touch the bare ground. Even so, the smell finds its way out. The laundress will come tomorrow, weather permitting, and when she does, she'll sort each piece with a practised eye, sniffing, checking stains, rubbing at seams, not out of disgust, but to assign blame. Was it sweat? Or worse, evidence of a woman's monthly shame, a topic so taboo that even now you refer to it only as that time. The underthings, being unmentionables, are often unwashed unless soiled beyond excuse, and even then they're boiled, not scrubbed. Scrubbing, everyone agrees, breaks the soul of the fabric. You once overheard a neighbour say her daughter was far too eager with the washboard, a suspicious trait in a girl barely 16. The older women, especially those married with pride to maintain, have their own system. They sprinkle underclothes with lavender water and hang them out briefly at dusk. Not long enough for the neighbours to notice, just long enough for a breeze to give the illusion of freshness. In your own house, there's a secret drawer where emergency linen is kept. It's not truly clean, just less worn. If an unexpected visitor arrives and you're asked to change, that's what you'll be given. You're warned not to soil it. That linen belonged to your grandmother, your aunt once whispered, as if it carried some noble burden. Washing, you begin to realise, isn't about dirt. It's about propriety. How it looks matters more than how it feels. If no one sees the filth, it doesn't exist. The ideal Victorian woman, according to a pamphlet you saw once in the market, never appears aware of her own body's needs. Her skin glows from modesty, not moisture. Her linens are clean because her mind is clean. Meanwhile, your underthings chafe slightly. You shift in your seat during the midday tea, pretending not to notice. Across the room, your uncle lifts his collar and sniffs discreetly. No one reacts. He's still within his acceptable threshold of manly musk. And yet, behind every door in this house, there's a pile of something hidden. A nightgown damp with sweat, a petticoat with a suspicious crease, a chemise that hasn't seen soap since Easter. But all of it folded, all of it arranged, all of it scrubbed from memory if not from the fabric itself. You begin to wonder, is everyone pretending? Of course they are. That's the rule. Because in this world, cleanliness isn't a feeling, it's a performance. And everyone plays their part, one unwashed petticoat at a time. You're standing in the hallway now, summoned for another small but sacred ritual. Soap distribution. The housekeeper unlocks the narrow pantry cupboard with a ring of jangling keys and reveals the treasure inside. Not spices, not silver, but 3 cakes of soap, each wrapped in linen and labelled in scratchy pencil. Kitchen, guest, and family. You reach toward the family bar, but her hand catches your wrist. Not yet. First, she must inspect your fingernails. She tilts your hand toward the morning light slanting through the hallway window and examines each finger. Brow furrowed, as if deciphering a secret code in the half moons. Only then does she hand you a sliver of yellow-grey soap, about the size of a matchbox, its edges cracked like parched earth. This is your ration. You're expected to make it last through the week, and that includes hands, face, feet, and anything else you're brave enough to wash. Soap in this household is more than hygiene. It's morality, thrift, and self-discipline carved into a rectangular bar. Your aunt reminds you that Queen Victoria herself favoured Pears soap, but only on occasion. Frequent soap use, she warns, signals vanity. Or worse, obsession. There's a story going round about a merchant's wife who used imported rose-scented soap twice a day. Her skin, they say, turned pale as wax and her husband went bankrupt. The two facts are always mentioned together, as if one caused the other. Back in the scullery, you press the soap into a damp cloth and begin to rub. Just enough to make a thin, filmy lather. Thick foam is a sign of wastefulness, and besides, the smell is sharp. This isn't lavender or lemon. It's lye heavy and vaguely medicinal, like a wound dressing that never fully healed. You clean your hands, then your wrists, then dab your face quickly, never lingering. The cheeks can grow thin with overwashing, according to the housemaid, who has none left herself. She dabs her own face with rosewater instead, calling it gentler. The irony? It contains more alcohol than a brandy flask and stings like vinegar. If you want more soap, there's a hierarchy. Father gets the largest piece, of course. His hands are to be washed after business, but never before, lest he seem too dainty. Mother uses a different bar, milder and pinker, which she keeps wrapped in a glove and stored behind a Bible. You, the younger generation, get the scraps. Soap chips that once belonged to your siblings, or were retrieved from the slop pail and reformed with boiling water and tallow. You remember the time you dropped your piece on the floor. It picked up ash, grit, and a curious hair. But instead of being given a new one, you were handed a blunt knife and told to shave off the surface and be grateful. The soap has rules, and breaking them means more than grime. It means waste, and waste is filth of the soul. You wrap the piece back in its cloth and return it to your dresser drawer. It still holds the scent of the hands you shook at church last Sunday. But in this house, soap is not about feeling clean. It's about appearing just clean enough. It's after lunch now, and your cousin is preparing for her piano lesson. She kneels by the hallway sink, a squat porcelain basin tucked behind a folding screen, and pulls out her special soap tin. It clicks open like a jewellery box. Inside, a pale disc of perfumed soap rests on a doily, no bigger than a biscuit and used only for the hands. Face and body? Never. That would be indulgent. She wets just her fingertips, dabs the bar once, then rubs until the faintest lather forms. That's all she needs to feel composed, to carry the scent of propriety into the drawing room. When she's done, she dries her hands on a square of muslin she keeps tucked in her sleeve. Heaven forbid she use the communal towel, grey with use and stiff with last week's residue. You've heard whispers that only the cook still dares touch it. Later, as she sits to play, the scent of her hands reaches your seat by the door. It's not roses or lilies, as you might hope, but almond, sharp, almost bitter. The soap came in a paper wrapper from a shop in town imported from Marseille, according to the label. She was gifted it by her aunt, who told her to use it only when being watched. There it is again, that line between cleanliness and performance. You begin to notice it everywhere. In the drawing room, the guest soap sits untouched in a porcelain dish, carved into the shape of a swan. No one is meant to use it. It's decorative purity. In fact, touching it is considered a minor scandal. The housemaid once moved it a few inches to dust the table, and your aunt shrieked as if someone had cracked a Fabergé egg. In the nursery, the children's soap is oatmeal-coloured and soft, whittled down to slivers barely clinging to existence. It's kept in an old sardine tin, half-rusted, and smells faintly of damp wool. No one worries too much about the children's skin until a rash appears. Then the doctor blames it on mother's neglect and prescribes more air, less soap. And in the kitchen, there's a special bar, brown, gritty, and meant for grease. It's not called soap exactly, it's scouring brick. You've used it before on your knees, scrubbing at a stain in the hallway after someone tracked in coal soot. The bar tore at your knuckles and your hands stung for hours, but you were praised for your effort. "That's good English skin," the housekeeper said, as if blood were proof of virtue. Once, a visitor from America asked boldly how often the family bathed with soap. Your uncle coughed into his napkin. Your aunt pretended not to hear. The question wasn't vulgar, it was unthinkable. Soap is not something to be discussed. It simply exists, quietly, in drawers and tins and locked cabinets. To speak of it is to betray its sacred utility. And so you continue the dance. Not too much, not too little. Just enough to keep the household from suspicion and the skin from cracking. The soap shrinks. The rules remain. You're woken the next morning not by a bell or a knock, but by a sudden, pressing need. You shuffle in the half-light toward the corner of your room, where the chamber pot waits beneath your bed, silent, still, and ominously full. There is no bathroom, not in this house nor in most of the neighbourhood. Instead, each bedroom contains its own ceramic solution to the body's most basic needs. Your pot is painted with faint blue flowers, now faded by years of use. It has a chip on the rim and a crack running down one side, patched with resin and a prayer. You crouch, careful not to tip the contents, and do your business without ceremony. The room is cold, the floorboards hard, and you try not to breathe too deeply. The smell hits anyway. Ammonia, sour and earthy, clings to the air like a damp shawl. You replace the lid gently and slide the pot back into the darkness beneath the bed, where it will remain until the household's evening disposal hour. Because here's the rule: chamber pots may only be emptied once a day, twice if someone is ill, but even then it must be done discreetly. Your aunt insists that carrying a full pot about in broad daylight invites indecency. So you wait, along with everyone else in the house, until after supper, when shadows fall and social judgment loosens slightly. Until then, you share space with it, sleep near it, dress beside it. The pot becomes a quiet companion, present in every morning breath and every reluctant kneel. There's no plumbing in this part of town, only a shared outdoor privy in the back garden, a place you avoid at all costs. The wood is splintered, the latch rusted, and in winter the seat is more ice than wood. Rats sometimes nest nearby, and during storms the whole structure leans ominously, as if considering collapse. Inside the house the chamber pot reigns supreme. Each room has one, and each has its own rules. The master bedroom's pot is larger, porcelain, with a lid carved like a seashell. The children's pots are smaller, tin, and dented from years of clumsy hands and midnight accidents. The guest room's pot is pristine, always empty, No guest has dared use it in years. You remember once asking your aunt why the pots couldn't be emptied after every use. She pursed her lips and muttered something about drudgery and unnecessary waste. But the truth, unspoken, is that the act of emptying is taboo. It involves acknowledging the very thing Victorian manners are built to conceal, that the human body refuses to obey decorum. The housemaid is responsible for the evening procession. You've seen her carry 2 pots at once, arms outstretched like a grim waitress. She never complains. She knows the protocol. Lid on tight, steps soft, eyes down. Should a drop spill, there's a rag in the hallway basket for wiping, and a worse rag in the kitchen if it's particularly bad. But until that hour arrives, you and your pot coexist in silent discomfort, because in Victorian homes, hygiene isn't about removal, it's about endurance. Evening arrives, and with it comes the quiet shuffle of ceramic against wood. You hear the first pot being lifted in the room next to yours, then another from the hallway chamber where your uncle sleeps. The air is still, the light dimming, and the house seems to hold its breath as the nightly ritual begins. The housemaid, Lizzie, appears at your door with a practiced look of indifference. She doesn't knock. She doesn't need to. Everyone knows the hour. She stoops, lifts the pot with both hands, and straightens with a quiet grunt. The lid wobbles, threatening to spill, but she steadies it with the ease of long experience. You avert your eyes out of habit. She's not supposed to exist in these moments. She's just the mechanism that makes polite society function. She disappears down the hall with the pot balanced like a sacred offering. Out back, through the scullery and the garden path, sits the slop bucket, a wide cast-iron basin with a wooden lid and a stench that could singe your eyebrows. It's supposed to be emptied by the night soil man twice a week. You think he's overdue. Sometimes, if the man misses his round, the servants must carry the bucket down to the canal or out to the back alley, where less scrupulous households dump theirs. You've seen the puddles, the slick trails glistening under gaslight. It's not talked about, but you recognise the scent. There's a reason chamber pots are called necessary. They're not just tools, they're anchors of bodily control, holding back chaos with porcelain walls. And as with everything else in the Victorian household, their use is governed by a strict moral logic. For example, it's considered unseemly to speak of the pot's contents directly. Euphemisms are mandatory. My evening duty, the porcelain letter, that small matter. You once heard a visitor apologise to the maid by saying, "I've left a little note in the corner." Everyone knew what she meant. Men are allowed to ignore the ritual entirely. Your uncle has never once emptied his own pot. The maid fetches it without prompting. For women, it's a test of grace. Your aunt insists the pot be handled as silently as a teacup. The lid must not clink. The steps must not echo. Dignity, she says, is preserved in the hush. Children, on the other hand, get no such dignity. If they soil outside the pot, or worse, miss altogether, they're marched to the backyard for a stern talking to and a damp sponge bath from the rain barrel. You remember your cousin standing in her nightgown once, dripping and shivering as the maid scrubbed her legs. She didn't cry. She just stared at the bricks. Sometimes, when no one is watching, you peek beneath the lid before Lizzie takes it away. You don't know why. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's just a quiet reminder that, beneath all the starch and lace, every person in this house ends their day the same way, hunched over a pot, pretending it doesn't matter. Because here in the world of lace curtains and soap tins, you don't conquer filth. You contain it. You're halfway down the stairs when you hear it. A rip, a soft curse, and the unmistakable flutter of newspaper. Your younger cousin has just torn a square from yesterday's Times, folded it neatly, and vanished into the hallway cupboard, the little water closet no one talks about unless absolutely necessary. Toilet paper as you know it doesn't exist in this house. Not because it hasn't been invented. It has, in the form of stiff medicated sheets sold in chemist shops, but because it's considered a luxury, one that's both wasteful and likely to encourage lingering. No one must linger. The water closet is for function only. Comfort is not part of the design. So instead, you're taught to make do. Your family, like many in the middle class, keeps a stack of torn newspaper squares, pierced with string and hung from a nail on the back of the door. They're rough, often smeared with ink, and sometimes still bear headlines about local deaths or empire victories. You've read entire obituaries while squatting in that cold little box, hoping the words might somehow make the experience feel less primitive. In homes with stricter etiquette, they use rags. Family cloths, they're called. Soft flannel strips cut from old shirts, laundered and reused, stacked neatly in a box beside the chamber or privy. Your aunt remembers her childhood home using nothing else, and she speaks of it as a mark of refined thrift. "We were clean without waste," she says, ignoring the smell that lingered in the hallway cupboard for days after wash day. There's an entire etiquette surrounding this makeshift paper. You must only take 1 square. 2 is indulgent, 3 is rude. You once saw your brother sneak 4, and he was scolded for being ungrateful to Providence. The fact that Providence was now filtered through ink-stained pulp did not escape you. Of course, if you're caught without any paper at all, there are rules for that too. The privy walls are often covered in soft cobwebs and flakes of crumbling plaster, and you're expected to make do with discretion. There's a story about a visiting cousin who used a page of scripture in desperation and was never invited back. The Bible may clean the soul, but not the body. Outdoors, it gets worse. On country visits, you've been handed a fistful of straw or, worse still, dried leaves, with the warning to check for thorns. The most unfortunate relative of all was caught using pages from a borrowed novel and spent the next 3 Sundays apologising to the vicar's wife. You come to understand, slowly, that even the act of cleaning yourself is governed by invisible codes. What you use, how much, how you fold, these things say something about you. Too neat, and you're vain. Too fast, and you're careless. Too long in the privy, and you'll be accused of idling with sin. Because in this house, as in most Victorian homes, hygiene is never just about health. It's about how quietly you do it. The hallway cupboard, the family's only water closet, is nothing more than a converted broom space. A wooden seat rests atop a small iron pail, and the door doesn't quite shut. There's no window, no sink, no candle, just you, the newspaper squares, and the cold draft that crawls up your spine like a warning. You sit quickly, knees drawn close, and your eyes trace the grain in the wooden door as if it might distract from the reality of the situation. There's no flushing, no water. When you finish, you drop the used paper into the tin pail below. The smell is immediate, familiar, and faintly metallic. You reach for the hand-washing jug, an old ceramic vessel perched on a crooked shelf, and tip it carefully over your fingers. The water is cold. There's no soap here. There never is. If you want soap, you'll have to leave the cupboard and walk back to the pantry, request permission, and fetch your ration. Most people don't bother. A brisk rub on the apron is considered sufficient. Behind you, someone knocks. A gentle knock, but urgent. You answer with a soft, "Just a moment," which is Victorian code for, "I'm pretending this isn't embarrassing." You tidy quickly, fold the remaining newspaper back into its nail loop, and straighten your collar before stepping out into the hall. Your cousin walks past you with a handkerchief over her nose, pretending it's for the dust. You pretend you don't notice. This is the rhythm of the house. Invisible discomforts passed silently from person to person, like a secret society of mild shame. On laundry day, the family cloths, if your house uses them, are boiled in a separate pot, never the one for sheets. The maid wears gloves for this task, but thin ones meant more for show than protection. You once saw her pick up a particularly soiled rag with the tips of 2 fingers, nose wrinkled, and mutter something under her breath that did not sound like a hymn. In wealthier homes, water closets with full plumbing are becoming a fashionable curiosity. Some houses now boast wooden seats with actual flush levers, though they're expensive, loud, and known to break mid-visit, leaving the unfortunate guest shouting for help. There's even a rumour that one woman was so startled by the rushing water that she fainted, and now insists on using a chamber pot for the sake of her nerves. Still, your family remains firm. Plumbing is a fad. Quiet dignity never goes out of style, and so the newspaper squares remain. You recognise their texture now, softer on rainy days, brittle when left near the stove. You've become an unwilling connoisseur of ink and print quality. A well-aged editorial can be quite pleasant, actually, if folded just right. It's strange how something so base becomes ritual, how a torn piece of yesterday's scandal can become your most private companion, and how even that, like everything else in this house, must be handled with poise, restraint, and just enough denial to keep you from asking if this is normal. Because here, in the quiet folds of Victorian hygiene, even your dignity comes in perforated squares. You've been summoned again, not for punishment, but for grooming. It's just after tea and the sun is casting a honeyed glow through the parlour curtains. This is the hour reserved for hair care, a ritual as intimate as it is quietly tyrannical. You take your place on the stool in front of the fireplace while your aunt retrieves the hairbrushes from the cabinet. There are 3 of them, each wrapped in linen like heirlooms. The brushes are not shared casually. There's a hierarchy. The softest boar bristle one belongs to your aunt, who treats it like a holy relic. She brushes her hair exactly 100 times each night, counting aloud under her breath like prayer beads. You've asked why, and she told you. It stimulates the moral fibres. You didn't dare question what that meant. The second brush, with a missing row of bristles, is for you and your cousin. It smells faintly of bay rum and old hair oil. You used to think it was just dirty. Now you know that scent is the residue of discipline. You're expected to use precisely 20 strokes per section of hair. No more, no less. Stray hairs must be plucked from the brush immediately after use and folded into tissue paper, then burned in the scullery stove once a week. Hair in this household is not just vanity, it's identity, virtue, and a kind of quiet warfare. Your aunt believes that tangled hair reflects a tangled soul. When she once caught your cousin with a knot at her nape, she didn't scold her. She clipped the strand off and buried it in the garden to return disorder to the earth. You flinch slightly as she drags the bristles across your scalp, pausing now and then to examine your part. It must be exactly centred, or risk drawing whispers about your home life. Girls with crooked parts are assumed to lack motherly supervision. You recall the housemaid, Lizzie, once brushing her own hair in the kitchen barefoot and humming. She had waist-length chestnut waves, wild and glossy. Your aunt fired her the next morning. Hair is not for display, she said flatly. It's for containment. There's oil too, of course there is. A little tin jar with a screw cap and a chipped label. Macassar. It's thick, dark, and smells like old spice cabinets. Your aunt warms a dab between her palms and smooths it into your ends, muttering about split hairs and moral decay. The oil leaves your scalp shiny and your neck sticky. But shine is everything. Your cousin once tried to wash it out with hot water and soap. Her hair puffed up like a thistle bush, and she was forbidden from attending church for 3 Sundays. Better unwashed than undignified, said your aunt, and so the rules settle into you, one strand at a time. Brush, oil, centre, check. Your hair is not your own. It is the household's reflection, your mother's proof, your class's signal, and your silence made visible. Because in this house, to let your hair down is to lose control. Your scent, upstairs to fetch the evening grooming tray, a small wooden box with 2 combs, one coarse and one fine, along with a palm-sized tin of pomade and a pocket mirror that never sits quite flat. You place it all on the table beside your cousin, who's seated dutifully at the dressing table, back straight, jaw set. She knows what's coming. The coarse comb goes first, teeth wide enough to catch only the worst tangles. It pulls sharply at the knots near her nape. She doesn't wince. That would be weakness. In Victorian households, pain is not something to be soothed. It's something to be endured. The fine comb follows, slower, deliberate. It's for lice, though no one says the word out loud. Unwanted visitors, your aunt calls them, as if they're neighbours dropping by uninvited. You've seen what happens when a child in the parish school is found scratching too often. Their mother gets a quiet note and a rough bar of sulphur soap. Sometimes, if the case is bad enough, the child returns with a shaved head and a bonnet tied too tight. Your cousin holds still. She's older now, nearly of marrying age, and this ritual is part of preparing for courtship. Clean hair, properly parted and lightly oiled, signals discipline. Too much gloss and she'll be called vain. Too little and the rumours begin. She must not be cared for at home. When the combing ends, she smooths a ribbon into place and folds her hands neatly in her lap. Her eyes dart toward the pomade, then back at the mirror. She doesn't touch it. Pomade is for special evenings, guests, church, or an outing with potential suitors. It's made of bear grease and rose oil, and if used too often it stains the pillowcases. That too becomes gossip. She sleeps with her hair dressed, they'd say with a smirk. Men's hair carries its own set of codes. Your brother once slicked his with too much oil before a funeral. The scent lingered during the hymns, and afterward the vicar took your father aside. "Let us not smell worldly," he murmured. Your brother spent the next 2 Sundays dry combing until his scalp flaked like snow. Hair left unbound after sunset is considered disobedient. Children's hair may fall freely, within reason, but once you pass 13, your locks must be braided or pinned before supper. Letting it fall down your back without cause is, in some circles, an invitation. You remember a visitor from Manchester, a girl of 16 who arrived with her hair loose in the rain. She was offered a hat and a Bible in quick succession. You've learned the unspoken rules. Never comb your hair on Sunday morning. That's considered unlucky. Don't brush it near a mirror at night, or you'll reflect sorrow. And above all, never share a comb outside the family. That's not just unhygienic. It's intimate, bordering on shameful. As you lay down that night, your braid tight against your neck, you feel the weight of the day's rituals pressing into the pillow. The oil leaves a faint mark, just as it always does. You'll flip the pillow tomorrow and pretend it's clean. Because here, where hygiene is made of rules more than water, every hair out of place carries a story, and someone is always watching. It's Saturday night, bath night. And the house feels different, tense, almost theatrical. The air smells of coal smoke, lye and anticipation. You've been dreading this since Wednesday, when your aunt first reminded everyone, in that tight-lipped voice of hers, bathing shall commence after supper. The tone alone carried the weight of a court summons. Downstairs, the copper boiler has been heating since early afternoon, fed with precious coal and watched closely by the housemaid. Water is carried bucket by bucket up the narrow staircase to the washroom, which isn't a bathroom at all, but a former linen closet just wide enough to fit the galvanised metal tub. The room is windowless, the walls lined with old newspaper and a faded print of Queen Victoria looking deeply unimpressed. The first to bathe is always your father, or your uncle if he's staying. He goes in with a towel, a sliver of soap, and strict instructions not to soak longer than 15 minutes. The water, already lukewarm, becomes murky quickly, and when he emerges, pink-faced, grumbling, steam rolling off his shoulders, he declares, as he always does, perfectly bracing. Next is your mother or aunt, depending on the order that week. A fresh kettle of hot water is stirred in, but not too much. Warmth is weakness, your aunt often says. She bathes in her shift, modesty intact even in solitude, and scrubs only what will be seen, arms, neck and ankles. Her hair remains pinned and dry. Then it's your turn. You step gingerly into the water. It's already grey, the faint sheen of oil floating on top. Bits of soap cling to the rim. There's a vague smell of sweat masked by carbolic acid. You pretend not to notice. The tin tub creaks beneath your weight, the metal cold against your back, even as the water laps tepid around your knees. There's no splashing, no lingering. You've been allotted 8 minutes. 10, if you're lucky. You scrub with the cloth that's been drying since last week, working quickly, avoiding the sensitive patches where the skin flakes from last week's scrubbing. Your aunt says that girls who linger in the bath are liable to faint. Or worse, get ideas. You clean the essentials. Just enough, never more. There's only 1 bar of soap allowed for the younger children and you. It's gritty, sun-cracked, and smells faintly of coal tar. You don't know how old it is. No one does. You rub it over your legs, then pass it back to your cousin, who's waiting with her shift already rolled above the knees. As you stand to dry, you catch your reflection in the cracked mirror above the washstand. Damp hair, flush skin, the line of your collarbone smudged with fading dirt. You feel cleaner, but not clean. That's not the point. The point is to be bathed, to follow the ritual, to exit the washroom with proof. Wet hair, reddened arms, the faint scent of soap clinging like virtue. And just like that, you're done. Wrapped in your coarse towel, you slip down the hallway, leaving a trail of water drops and unspoken rules behind you. Because in a Victorian home, a bath isn't for comfort, it's for control. You towel off quickly, careful not to wet the floorboards. The towel is barely absorbent, a faded thing that smells faintly of last week's fire smoke and something vaguely musty. You pat, not rub, because rubbing wears out the cloth faster. That's one of the many small warnings you've learned. Waste not. Wipe gently. As you step out of the washroom, your cousin hurries in, clutching her shift and the soap shard you passed to her. Her face is blank, resigned. This isn't a luxury. It's her turn in the rota. Her bath water will be yours, just slightly cooler and more shared. The water will darken again, the tub will creak again, and the ritual will repeat in precise silence. In some houses you've heard, the whole family bathes in the same water. Father first, then the mother, then the children by age, eldest to youngest. The idea makes your stomach twist, but it's common enough that no one blinks at the practice. The water's still warm, they'll say, as if that's all that matters. You pad back to your bedroom, feet damp, towel clutched tight around your shoulders. There's no changing into fresh nightwear. You slip into the same flannel gown you wore last night, stiff at the collar, yellowed at the cuffs. It's been airing by the window all day, which is enough to declare it refreshed. And your aunt says that bathing should make the body warm enough that sleepwear doesn't need laundering. If it's cold, that's your fault for not scrubbing with enough vigour. Back in the hallway, a kettle whistles. Another bucket of hot water is coming up for your brother's turn. The maid, flushed and weary, passes you without eye contact. She carries the water in a copper pail, steam trailing behind her like ghostly laundry. Her arms must ache by now. No one mentions it. Downstairs, the scullery maid has begun boiling the last kettle of the night. She'll use it to rinse the tub when everyone's done, wiping down the rim with a rag soaked in vinegar. The same rag will be used to polish the stair railings the next morning. Nothing is wasted. Even filth must serve more than once. Later, as you lie in bed, still damp and sticky with lingering soap film, you smell the faint sharpness of carbolic acid in your hair. It's not a pleasant scent, but it's the smell of cleanliness, or at least what passes for it. It tells your aunt that you've done your duty. It tells the household that you've been scrubbed, inspected, and made orderly once more. And yet, the oddest part is the aftermath. There's no sense of freshness, no delight, no silky towels or fluffy robes, just the weight of damp linen, the bite of cold air through the shutters, and the quiet ache in your knees from crouching too long in the tin tub. You've performed cleanliness, but comfort. That would be indulgent. Bath night isn't about feeling good, it's about submitting. And you've learned, the hard way, that in this house, and in this age, obedience is the truest form of hygiene. So you close your eyes and wait for sleep to claim you before the cold does. You're sitting quietly by the parlour window the next morning when the door creaks open and your cousin is summoned. Not with words, but with a glance from your aunt. It's her time, not for punishment or praise, but for inspection. There's a peculiar hush that falls over the house on these days. The men have gone to church, the younger children are banished to the garden, and the women gather in the drawing room, curtains drawn, hands folded neatly on their laps. At the centre of the ritual is your cousin, 16, trembling slightly, hair tightly pinned, posture rigid. Your aunt opens a small wooden case. Inside, a cloth, a bottle of diluted vinegar, a bar of soft soap wrapped in muslin, and a stack of white cotton handkerchiefs. This is not a bath. This is something older, a cleansing of sorts, one that only applies to women, and one that must never be spoken of by name. The vinegar is for balancing, as your aunt says with practised vagueness. It's meant to keep the body proper, pure and unspoiled. The cloth is dipped, wrung, and dabbed in precise invisible patterns beneath layers of clothing. You know the region she reaches, though you're never meant to see. You've had this done to you too, once a month, more if your behaviour draws concern. In the Victorian household, a woman's hygiene is not her own. It's a moral duty overseen by mothers, aunts, governesses, anyone charged with ensuring that no stain, no smell, no suggestion of disorder ever escapes the body. Even natural functions are viewed with suspicion. Any trace of irregularity must be masked, corrected, purified. If a girl's monthly cycle comes too early, she's watched more closely. Too late, and she's questioned privately. The linen drawers are inspected each week. Stains must be soaked, scrubbed, hidden. There are whispers of girls being sent away after an incident. No one explains what that means. You're left to imagine the worst. You've read in the Ladies' Domestic Guide that over-cleanliness in women is a sign of nervous instability. But so is under-cleanliness. The perfect young woman must maintain herself without fuss, without pride, and without any acknowledgement of the work involved. Her body must be silent, as the book puts it, neat, odourless, invisible. You glance over at your cousin. Her eyes are fixed on a spot in the wallpaper, and her lips are pressed into a flat line. She doesn't flinch when the cold cloth touches her. She's done this before. She'll do it again. When the cleansing is done, the cloth is folded into the bottom of the wooden box. The handkerchiefs are dabbed with lavender water and placed discreetly inside her bodice. One for freshness, one for modesty, one for protection, though from what, no one ever explains. And then it's over. She rises, smooths her skirt and leaves the room without a word. The women resume their knitting. Your aunt locks the box, because in this house, a woman's body must be clean, but never acknowledged, pure, but never spoken of, maintained, but never owned, and above all it must never ever bleed in silence. Later that evening you help fold laundry in the upstairs corridor while the last bit of light fades through the frosted windowpane. You're careful with the underthings. The cloths are white, crisp but slightly discoloured at the edges, traces of old vinegar, soap, or something more natural and never named. You fold them in threes, just as your aunt taught you, never quarters. That's for table linens, and mixing up the two would be unthinkable. There's a separate stack for the monthly cloths, slightly thicker, darker fabric, wrapped tightly with string and stored in a wooden box labelled winter linens, even in summer. Everyone knows what's inside. No one says it aloud. Washing these is an ordeal. The maid must do it before sunrise or after dark. The water must be hot, the soap strong, and the drying must be done when no one, not even the neighbours, can see. A single glimpse of a stained rag on the line is enough to bring shame to an entire household. Your cousin once dropped one, and the house was in quiet panic until it was recovered from beneath the rose bushes. Your aunt didn't speak to her for 3 days. There are rules for when a girl is unwell. She's not to run, not to eat certain fruits, not to touch plants. They'll wilt, the midwife says. She must avoid dogs, babies, and especially unmarried men. And she must wash, often. Not with water, but with cloth and scent and whispered warnings passed down like folk tales. You've overheard the stories. The girl who didn't wash properly and went mad, the one who bled too heavily and was sent to an aunt in the country, never to return, the one who whispered to her brother what was happening and was slapped, hard for her immodesty. And then there's the doctor's advice. Some say bathing during a woman's time is dangerous, opens the body to cold, weakens the blood. Others insist that not bathing is more dangerous. The result? No one really knows what to do, so they settle for in between: vinegar wipes, fresh cloth, and silence. Perfume, of course, plays its part. Not too floral. Floral is suspicious. Not too strong. That invites attention. A faint trace of lavender or rosewater dabbed behind the ears is acceptable. Some girls pin dried herbs into their corsets or tuck sachets into their petticoats. You've tried both. Neither works well enough to mask fear. You know that boys don't go through this. Your brother bathes when told and never worries if he smells faintly of the horse or coal dust. That's the scent of labour, your uncle says proudly, of industry. But for girls, even a hint of sourness is considered a personal failure. That night, as you change for bed, you inspect your shift. There's a faint spot on the hem, not enough to worry about, but enough to wrap the garment in a darker cloth before placing it in the laundry bin. You fold it quickly, hands practiced, breath steady. Because in this world, a woman's cleanliness is never just about dirt. It's about secrecy. It's about sacrifice. And it's about surviving, one silent stain at a time. It's Monday morning, and you're called to the kitchen for what the household calls the weekly cleanse. Not a bath, not quite. There's no full undressing, no soaking. Instead, it's what your aunt refers to as taking the waters, a ritual that involves nothing more than a shallow foot bath, a cloth, and a quietly miserable hour of pretending this is sufficient. You take your seat on the low stool near the hearth. A tin basin is filled with warm water, not hot. Hot water is for scalding dishes or treating infection, not for comfort. The maid pours a few drops of something sharp-smelling into the basin. Vinegar, most likely, or camphor oil if someone's been coughing. The scent stings your nose and seeps into the hem of your nightdress. You dip your feet in. The warmth lasts only a moment before the chill of the stone floor creeps back into your skin. You sit still, toes curling slightly in the basin, while your aunt prepares a cloth to wipe down your legs and neck. These are the exposed areas, she says, and therefore the only ones that require frequent attention. No soap is involved, only friction and intention. The cloth is coarse, rougher than it should be, and carries the faint residue of whatever body it scrubbed last. You try not to think about that. Instead, you lift your skirt to the knee, just as your cousin did before you, and wait for the cloth to make its journey. It's humiliating in a quiet, routine way, not dramatic, not cruel, just uncomfortably ordinary. You're expected to submit to this without flinching, without comment. To complain is to imply pride, or worse, softness. This ritual, part hygiene, part discipline, was once described by a visiting cousin as the Protestant purge. She meant it as a joke, but your aunt didn't laugh. She believes deeply in the cleansing power of vinegar and elbow grease. A good rub draws the sin out, she once said, wiping your neck so hard your skin flushed pink for an hour. Your brother, meanwhile, will wash his hands, splash water on his face, and be done for the day. He'll return to the yard smelling of horse and sweat, and be praised for it. But you must smell like nothing at all. Not sweat, not skin, not even soap, just faint linen and obedience. When your feet are clean, or rather, when they've been sufficiently rinsed, you're handed a rag to pat them dry. The towel has seen better days. It's scratchy, threadbare, and smells like the cupboard it was stored in. Still, you're told to fold it neatly when done and return it to its place, as though it were something fine. The basin is not emptied, it's reused. First by your cousin, then your aunt, then the maid if she's lucky. By the end, the water has cooled to a sullen grey, tinged with the grime of the day, and whatever emotions were never spoken aloud. You walk away with damp ankles, a raw neck, and the familiar ache of compliance settling into your spine. Because in this house, a foot bath isn't for relief, it's a performance, and your part is to endure it, quietly. As the others take their turn at the basin, you're sent to fetch the drying bricks from the scullery oven. They're not for your feet, they're for the boots that stand in 2 neat rows by the back door, each pair lined up according to rank and age. The warm bricks are slid inside to wick away dampness, but you can't help noticing how they smell. Faintly sour, like wool after a storm. On your way back, you pass the drawing room where your cousin sits by the fire, with her hem lifted discreetly above her ankles, trying to air them dry. Her feet are pink, blotchy, and starting to chap. She notices you and gives a small shrug. Neither of you says anything. You don't talk about the water, not the colour of it, not the smell. Certainly not the fact that it hasn't been changed between family members. Later, when your uncle returns from his walk, he removes his boots, peels off his socks, and dips his toes into the now-cooled basin without a word. No one scolds him. No one dares suggest the water is past use. For men, hygiene is practical. For women, it's penance. You notice how he doesn't dry his feet afterward, just puts on fresh socks and pads into the sitting room like nothing happened. You remember once doing the same and getting a switch to the back of the knees. Wet feet invite fever, your aunt hissed, and fever invites shame. The rules are never consistent, they shift depending on age, gender, time of day, and whether the house is expecting callers. If a visitor is due, you must rinse again, even if you've already done so that morning. No one wants to smell the garden on your stockings, your aunt once snapped, though you hadn't been near the garden in days. And then there's the issue of what you wear afterward. Bare feet are fine for children, but scandalous for young women. Stockings must be donned swiftly, even if your legs are still damp, even if the wool scratches at your freshly rubbed calves. And the stockings must be mended. No holes, no sagging. A drooping hem is a sign of weak morals. As the day winds down, the basin is finally emptied into the hedge out back, where steam rises briefly before fading into the cold air. You watch it disappear, and a strange mix of relief and futility washes over you. It's gone, until next Monday. Your feet are clean, but your skin stings, and in the quiet of your room, as you unwrap the cloth from your hair and rub your calves with your sleeves, you wonder, not for the first time, whether all this scrubbing is really about cleanliness at all. Because deep down you've begun to suspect the truth. These rituals aren't about removing filth, they're about proving that you're willing to live with it. It's late afternoon and the air inside the house has grown heavy. Closets shut tight, doors closed against drafts, and the fireplace in every room puffing out thick, sluggish smoke. You step into your bedroom and pause. The scent hits you first. Not unpleasant, but layered. Soap long since used, damp wool, old fire ash, last week's hair oil. The bed still holds a trace of vinegar from yesterday's linen wipe down, and beneath it all, a deeper musk. Human. Stale. You move toward the window to let in a breeze, hand brushing the curtain cord, but your aunt's voice cuts through the hallway. Not the window, you freeze. Of course not. You forgot. Opening windows is strictly limited in this household, not because of insects, not even because of weather. It's the miasma they fear, bad air, thought to be the carrier of illness, misfortune, and sin. To let in a breeze from the outside world is to invite death itself through the sill. Victorians believe air must be managed. It is not simply inhaled, it's filtered through layers of cloth, through smoke, through rules. You've been taught to trust in door gaps, in the occasional open flue, and in the belief that heavy air is safer. It settles, your aunt says with confidence, as if dust and death sit in corners, too tired to rise. The result is this. The rooms feel padded, dense. Every breath is a little warmer than you'd like. Every scent lingers longer than it should. The house, in summer, is a trap. In winter, a slow-cooked stew of people. To fight it, your family turns to rags. Not just any rags, window stuffers. Strips of linen rolled into tight sausages, pressed along the base of every window, every door frame. Their job? To stop drafts. Because drafts are wicked. They move too fast. They stir what should remain settled. You were once scolded for leaving a door ajar and letting the curtains twitch. Even fireplaces are suspect. The upstairs ones are rarely lit for warmth. They're sealed with old stockings stuffed into grates to prevent the pull. If your room feels cold, you're told to wear an extra shawl. But under no circumstances should you invite the outside. Instead, the household creates its own air. Pomanders hang from bedposts, dried orange skins spiked with cloves, meant to cleanse the air by smell alone. Vinegar bowls rest under side tables, and occasionally a smouldering dish of herbs is passed room to room like incense. This, they believe, is how you defend a house from illness. You remember once, when your brother had a cough, your aunt lit a saucer of turpentine and placed it on the landing. The smoke was eye-watering. He got better in 3 days. She took credit. The irony. The one thing no one does is clean the air. Not with cloth, not with water. Dust is rarely wiped, just brushed aside or swept under rugs. Soot on the walls is ignored. Curtains are never washed, only shaken out the window when no one is looking. That chore, reserved for spring, is called airing the sins, though you're never quite sure which sins they mean, and so you breathe shallowly. You learn to distinguish the smells of different rooms, your uncle's leather chair and tobacco, your cousin's perfume mixed with starch, the faint mildew in the guest room no one dares acknowledge. Because in this house, you don't let the outside world in. You keep the inside from escaping, and whatever festers in the corners, you learn to live with it. Evening falls and the house tightens. Doors are latched, curtains drawn, and rags restuffed along the windowsills. You can hear the dull thump of cloth hitting wood as the maid moves from room to room, muting the edges of the world one window at a time. Outside, a breeze picks up, cool, fresh, stirring the leaves, but inside the air remains thick, sour and motionless. In the parlour, your aunt lights another bowl of vinegar and places it on the mantel. She waves her hand through the air like a priest offering benediction. "This will kill whatever's drifting in," she says. You nod, though your eyes sting. You've grown used to the vinegar, just as you've grown used to the lavender water dabbed under every pillow, the camphor blocks tucked into every drawer, and the muslin sachets of herbs sewn into your undergarments. And yet, no matter how many precautions are taken, the smell of people lingers. You notice it in the hallway most of all, that narrow artery of shared breath and footsteps. It smells faintly of damp boots, coal dust, ironed linen, and something human, something warm. A reminder that this house is full of bodies that are rarely allowed to sweat but do anyway. Your uncle calls this scent the odour of civilization. He says it proudly, as though it's the smell of progress itself, but your aunt, ever proper, loathes it. She burns more cloves in the sitting room, sprinkles the floor with dried thyme, and keeps a dried lemon on her writing desk, which she presses to her nose whenever the dog passes through. The worst offence of all is a draught with smell. That's when someone opens a door too quickly, stirring the settled air and sending it rushing through the house like an escaped secret. Once the maid left the kitchen door open while airing a rug, and the resulting gust carried the scent of boiled cabbage all the way to the stairwell. The family didn't speak of it, but your aunt had the rug burned. You've learned to tiptoe, not out of fear, but out of respect for the stillness. The air in this house is not to be disturbed. It holds history, it holds judgment, and above all it holds the illusion of purity. When bedtime comes, you're expected to warm the sheets with a brick, not too hot, or with your own body, curled tight beneath the blankets. You must not open the window, not even a crack, though you ache for coolness. Cold air on the face invites a chill of the lungs, your aunt warns, and that is the death of many a careless girl. So you lie there, motionless, breathing the same breath as yesterday and the day before. The pillow smells faintly of hair oil and rosewater. The mattress holds years of forgotten sweat. You pull the sheet to your chin and close your eyes, pretending you're somewhere open, where the air moves without permission. Because here, in this house of rituals and rules, you don't refresh the air. You preserve it, like everything else. You're standing in the upstairs hallway, blinking the sleep from your eyes when your aunt calls out, "Rinse before breakfast." Her voice is sharp, as if she's catching you mid-sin. You nod and move toward the washstand, your stomach already rumbling, but the ritual must come first. Atop the small wooden stand is the shared water jug, ceramic, slightly chipped, its spout stained with lime. It was filled last night, not this morning, and has since settled into a sullen lukewarmness. You tip it carefully into the matching bowl, where the water lands with a sound you've come to associate with duty. Not relief, not refreshment, just obligation. You cup your hands to splash your face, but your aunt appears behind you, as she often does, with a warning. Not from the bowl, from the jug. You pause, hands wet, and obey. The difference is important. The bowl is for catching the water, not using it. It's been the same rule for years, passed down like some sacred commandment. Why? Because the bowl is unclean by default, tainted with backwash, with finger drips, with the very evidence that someone has been here before you. The jug, on the other hand, is still pure. It holds potential, not waste. But here's the paradox: the jug is only filled once a day. After the third or fourth person uses it, the rim becomes greasy with fingerprints. By mid-morning, floating hairs begin to appear, And yet, no one dares suggest refilling it. Water costs labour. It must be pumped from the yard, hauled up in sloshing buckets, then allowed to rest until the sediments settle. To discard it would be to insult the maid's work and the economy of the house. So you tip the jug again, this time more gingerly. You rinse your mouth, not with enthusiasm, but with calculation. Just enough to clear the taste of sleep, not enough to seem indulgent. You spit into the chamber pot tucked beneath the stand, careful not to let the noise echo. There's a lace drape meant to hide the pot, but everyone knows it's there. You've seen its contents: tea-tinted water, stray soap suds, the occasional leaf from a forgotten poultice. You reach for the cloth, the same one as yesterday, now stiff with use. You pat your face dry, fold it precisely, and place it back on the stand. The rules say never to leave it askew. A crooked towel, your aunt claims, is the first sign of a house in decline. Your cousin arrives next. She doesn't speak, just nods, picks up the jug, and repeats your motions like a solemn dance. You both pretend not to notice the rim of the bowl darkening, the cloth growing crusted, the scent of stale water rising as the morning wears on. Because none of it matters. Not really. What matters is the performance, the ritual, the illusion of freshness. You once asked why the jug isn't washed every day. Your aunt said, "It doesn't need washing if no one misuses it." A sentence so perfectly Victorian, it wraps itself around your thoughts for hours, because, in this house, water isn't for cleansing, it's for behaving. The jug makes its rounds. From your washstand to your cousin's, then down the corridor to your brother's room, where the handle clinks slightly with each pass. By the time it reaches the guest room, the water inside is tinged slightly yellow from the minerals and dust that have settled in overnight. But no one notices, or rather, no one says they do. The guest room is rarely used, but when it is, the rules grow even stricter. The jug must be filled fresh, boiled first, cooled just enough, then carried with both hands on a silver tray. The matching basin must be spotless, the cloth must be new, the soap must be unwrapped and left untouched, its edges still sharp. All of this, not because guests are expected to use them, but because they might. The idea is not to provide comfort, but to display preparedness. You once peeked into the room after a cousin visited and found the basin bone dry, the soap unblemished, the towel still creased from folding. Yet your aunt beamed as she declared, "He said the facilities were quite up to standard." Cleanliness, you see, does not require use, it only requires witness. But for the rest of the household, the reality is far less pristine. By midday, the jug's water is nearly gone, but no one dares request a refill. The maid, if she notices, pretends not to. Instead, a quiet calculus begins. Each person takes a little less, waits a little longer, hoping someone else will be the one to ask. You often catch your cousin dipping the cloth into the basin rather than the jug, an act of resignation that earns a disapproving glance from your aunt, who somehow always knows. To refill it yourself is unthinkable. That would mean going downstairs, lifting the iron pump handle in the courtyard, and drawing cold, hard water into the house. Not your role, not your right. That's for the maid, and only on her schedule. And so the rituals persist. Mouths are rinsed with the last inch of water, then the jug is tilted upside down to drain, though never fully, lest it be called neglectful. The cloth is hung to dry over the edge of the stand, despite the fact it hasn't been truly dry in days. And the basin? It sits, ringed with faint residue, slowly collecting the forgotten traces of the whole household. Once a week, usually on Sunday, the basin is emptied out the back window into the garden. The water lands with a splash among the rhubarb and the withering mint, which your aunt claims thrives best when fed with family water. You're not sure that's true, but the mint does smell stronger near the laundry line. You've come to understand that cleanliness in this house is not defined by soap or scrubbing. It's defined by deference, by silence, by who touches what and how gently. The jug, chipped and aging, remains a symbol, not of water, but of control. And in the quiet clink of porcelain and the whisper of damp cloth against skin, you hear it clearly. Clean enough is never really clean, but it's all you're allowed to ask for. You're called to the sideboard after supper, not for dessert, but for the next small ritual in this endless choreography of cleanliness, toothbrushing. Not everyone in the house does it. Your uncle, for instance, claims his pipe keeps his breath fresh enough, and your younger brother was only made to start last winter when the schoolmistress noted that his mouth carries an odour of cheese. But for you, and for all young ladies of acceptable standing, it is expected. You reach into the drawer and remove the family's toothglass, a cloudy tumbler with a crack up one side and a soft white film at the bottom. Inside it sits a communal brush, bristles splayed like hay in a storm, the handle softened with years of damp fingers. You do not speak as you remove it. You do not flinch. Next, the powder. It lives in a round tin near the vinegar bottle labelled tooth scour. The lid resists. You twist it open to reveal the chalky grit inside, off-white, speckled with darker flecks. It smells faintly of baking soda, stronger of salt, and faintly of something metallic. You suspect it's brick dust. You once read in the Penny Household Reader that many pastes use powdered charcoal or crushed eggshells. One formula even included soot and snuff. You wet the brush, not with clean water, but by dipping it gently into the cup everyone shares, then dab it into the powder. It clings in small, sharp clumps. There's no foam, no minty coolness, no promise of sparkle. This is a process of abrasion, of scraping, not cleansing. You begin. The bristles grind against your teeth like sandpaper. There is no pleasure here, no bright smile in the mirror, just the sound of scraping and the memory of your aunt's warning. A lady's breath should carry no tale of her breakfast. That's why you do this, even when it makes your gums bleed, even when the powder stings the back of your throat. You finish quickly, spitting into the same tin basin used for rinsing vegetables just hours before. The water turns cloudy. You rinse the brush briefly and return it to its glass. You do not dry it. That's not part of the routine. The idea is to keep it damp, to make the next round easier. Your cousin takes her turn next. She doesn't ask if you've cleaned the brush. No one does. Hygiene here is an act of trust, not assurance. The same brush, the same water, the same powder tin passed from mouth to mouth like communion in a church that worships order instead of comfort. On rare occasions, you're permitted to use a salt rub instead, pressed onto a clean rag and wrapped round your finger. That's reserved for illness, though, or when the gums are too raw for bristles. Your aunt used to keep a clove or two in her apron pocket for emergencies. She'd press them to your aching tooth until the burn drove out the pain. But clove oil stains linen, and stained linen raises questions, so you smile carefully, speak softly, and rinse without complaint, because in this house the mouth is not a place for joy or laughter. It's a place to be managed. You're still in the kitchen when your brother strides in, skips the tooth glass entirely, and pops a licorice lozenge into his mouth. "That'll do," he says, grinning. Your aunt frowns but says nothing. For boys, especially growing ones, bad breath is waved off as the price of vitality. "It builds character," your uncle once muttered after burping onion at the breakfast table. But for you, the standards are unbending. Your aunt checks your breath the way others check the weather, discreetly but often. A slight wrinkle of her nose is all the sign you need to be summoned again to the washstand. The real trouble begins when someone loses a tooth. Your cousin lost one last month. A molar, black at the edge, crumbling like stale biscuit. She didn't cry, just wrapped it in a handkerchief and slipped it into the stove when no one was looking. Not out of sentiment, out of shame. In this household, tooth decay is treated like moral failure. Not enough brushing, not enough rinsing, too much vinegar or perhaps too many sugared almonds after tea. Whatever the cause, the blame always falls on the sufferer, even if they were never given their own brush, even if they were only following the rules. To hide the rot, your aunt has a recipe, a paste made from honey, chalk and ash, pressed into the tooth with a rounded pin. It tastes foul, but it covers the brown. Temporarily, she swears by it. "I used it when I courted your uncle," she once told you, tapping her lower jaw. "No one knew a thing." And then there's the breath masks. Small clove balls wrapped in lace and kept in lockets. The women in your family carry them when visiting others. Not for themselves, but for others. Because bad breath is never admitted, it's hinted at, whispered, avoided like a disease. The irony? Most mouths here have the same scent, a blend of vinegar-rinsed scorched bread and the faint bitterness of tea leaves. But no one mentions it. That would be uncouth. You're expected to pretend the mouth is a private space, though it's regulated, inspected and judged daily. You remember once reading a passage from a novel where a lady had her teeth polished with pumice and rosewater. It sounded like magic. Your aunt scoffed. "A fiction," she said. "Real women keep their mouths shut and their tongues clean." And so, each night, you follow the same routine. Scrub, rinse, pat dry. You dare not skip a step. Not even when you're tired. Not even when your gums throb. The brush remains in its cloudy glass, watching you like a relic. The powder tin closes with a snap. The basin is poured out the window with the rest of the grey water. No one ever cleans the glass. No one dares ask for a new brush. You don't clean your mouth to feel fresh. You clean it to remain invisible. It's laundry day, and the house is in quiet uproar. The usual rhythms are suspended. Chairs are stacked, rugs rolled, curtains pinned up like petticoats. The air smells of boiling water and scorched linen, and you know better than to be in the maid's way. You're told to help sort the garments, an innocent enough task until you see what's truly involved. Because this isn't just laundry, it's an audit. Each article is held to the light. Undergarments are inspected, not only for soil but for stories. A yellowing at the collar may mean sweat, but a dark smear, that invites speculation. Your aunt eyes each mark with the suspicion of a court judge, lips pressed into a thin line. Stains are shame, smells are guilt, and nothing is private once it reaches the laundry table. The real scrutiny, though, is reserved for the linens, shifts, chemises, nightgowns. Anything that touches skin too long is expected to betray something, and it usually does. The maid sorts the garments by category: his, hers, children's, and within those piles by degree of sin. The worst go into the boiling pot first. This cauldron dominates the scullery, blackened with years of soot and crowned with steam that curls up like secrets escaping. Water is drawn with effort. Soap is shaved by hand from a bar so dry it crumbles. Ash is sometimes added for extra bite. There's no scent, only heat and shame. You help stir, the paddle nearly too heavy for your arms. The first layer in the pot is anonymous, but not really. You know the hem stitching, you know the colour of the thread, and you try not to let your face change as it all sinks below the bubbling surface. Stirring too slowly is wasteful. Stirring too vigorously is vulgar. There's a rhythm to be maintained, and your aunt watches closely. Eventually everything is drawn out with iron tongs and passed to the ringing bench. That's where the real confessions happen, because ringing means touching. You feel the fabric, its weight, It's secrets. A sweat-soaked collar, a petticoat heavy in the centre, a nightdress with a faint yellow streak that won't quite lift, no matter how much lye is scrubbed into it. Your cousin whispers that once, a girl was sent away for a recurring stain. You nod solemnly. The term is vague, but the meaning is clear. Later, the clean things are carried out to the yard and pinned to the line, only if the neighbours are deemed trustworthy today. Your aunt says some women spy during laundry hour, peering over fences, judging the shape of every drying shirt. The family next door once gossiped that your cousin had unusually wide petticoats. The implication was clear. She cried for 2 days. You help hang the lighter items, handkerchiefs, undercaps, sleeves. The heavier ones are left to the maid, and as you pin them, you realise something strange. The cleaner they are, the more visible they become, flapping in the wind like proclamations. This is what we wear. This is what we sweat in. This is what we hide. Because in a Victorian home, the laundry line isn't just about drying. It's about declaring who you are and who you're not. By late afternoon, the garments on the line are nearly dry, fluttering like ghostly silhouettes against the smoky sky. You're told to retrieve them, but not alone. Your aunt follows, inspecting each item as it comes off the line, her hands moving with practiced judgment. She presses fabric to her nose. She squints at seams. A faint streak or stubborn crease can still undo the entire effort. As you unpin your cousin's nightgown, you hesitate. There's a shadow of something at the hem. Not colour, not dirt exactly. Just a trace. You look to your aunt, who takes it from your hands, holds it to the light and says nothing. But you hear the air tighten between you. That nightgown will be reboiled, which means it will be boiled again. Not necessarily to clean it, but to erase the possibility that anyone might think it was unclean. The linen gets folded in silence. Stains mean more than stains. They mean carelessness, secret longings, disobedience. A young woman with frequent underarm marks is considered suspiciously emotional. One with blood at the thigh seam? Even worse. The term ruined linen holds more weight than you ever understood when you were younger. By now the basket is full. The final step is to mark each item with chalk. Who it belongs to, what day it was cleaned, whether it needs mending. Mending is done on Wednesdays, in silence. You've learned that those with the most repairs also bear the most attention. A girl whose underclothes are constantly patched is either very poor or very active. Neither brings pride. You help carry the basket inside, back to the airing room, an upstairs closet that's always kept warm with a brick stove. The scent there is sharp, a mix of soap that's been boiled too long, starch and human effort. Garments are laid out on wooden racks. They're not hung, they're posed. Each petticoat must face the same way, each shift folded just so. If a visitor were to peek in, they'd see only order. That's the goal. In truth, the airing room is the house's final confessional. Here, the clothes either pass inspection or quietly disappear. You've watched items vanish before. A chemise that wouldn't come clean, a kerchief someone shouldn't have worn. They're burned, repurposed, or given to the poor. Sometimes they just stop being mentioned. Later, over supper, your aunt recounts how laundry day went. "Fair," she says, slicing into bread. "Better than last week." That's praise, believe it or not. She doesn't mention the nightgown. She doesn't have to. The next morning, when you retrieve your folded linen from the airing shelf, everything is clean, technically. But as you run your fingers along the edges, you remember what was scrubbed, what was boiled, what was barely saved. Because in this house, cleanliness is not a condition. It's a defence, a way to say, we are still respectable, we are still in control. Even if the soap ran out, Even if the water cooled too soon, even if nothing ever feels truly clean, the stains are gone, but not the fear. It's a mild Wednesday when your nose begins to run. Just a tickle at first, a sniff here, a dab there. Nothing dramatic. But your aunt notices. She always notices. Within the hour, she has summoned you into the drawing room with a handkerchief already laid out like an accusation. "Use this," she says, not unkindly, but firmly. The handkerchief is pressed linen, embroidered in the corner with your initials. An expectation in respectable homes. You're not allowed to carry just any scrap of cloth in your sleeve. No, it must be a proper square, clean, folded just right, with a faint scent of lavender or camphor. Not for you, necessarily, but for those around you. In Victorian society, hygiene isn't about comfort, it's about consideration. You hold the cloth delicately, unsure whether to use it at all. You've seen your cousin turn hers inward after a sneeze, fold it twice, then tuck it back into her cuff as if nothing happened. That's the ideal, quiet, quick, unnoticeable. A public sneeze, after all, can ruin a private reputation. The rules are complicated. Loud nose-blowing is vulgar. Sniffling too often is worse, seen as attention-seeking or ill-mannered. But wiping without a handkerchief? That's near criminal. You remember the time your younger brother wiped his nose on his sleeve during a dinner guest visit. He was made to eat alone for a week, his jacket sent to be washed with salt. And so the handkerchief becomes your shield. You're expected to carry at least two, one in your sleeve, one in your pocket. Sometimes three, if you're travelling. One is for yourself, one is for lending, should another lady find herself without. The third, that's the presentation cloth, pure white, untouched. There only for display should anyone inquire if you have a handkerchief on your person. Even the way you hold it matters. Never balled up, never visibly damp, folded twice over, then again, tucked gently between thumb and palm. You've practiced in the mirror, but heaven help you if it shows colour. A stained handkerchief speaks volumes. A yellowed edge might suggest sweat. A faint pink could mean more. And if the cloth smells of illness, vinegar, camphor, even mustard, you'll be marked as delicate, which in Victorian code means both untrustworthy and inconvenient. Your aunt keeps a drawer full of old handkerchiefs, some with lace, others with monograms, a few darkened beyond repair. She calls them her emergency stock. You've only ever seen them used during funerals or harsh winters. They're too worn for polite society, too precious for the rag bin. There's also the matter of handkerchief etiquette in conversation. If a man offers his, you must refuse unless fainting is imminent. If you do accept, it must be returned by post, washed, ironed, and folded into a note of thanks. Your cousin once returned one without scenting it first, and the gossip among the sewing circle was merciless. So now, as you sniff quietly and pat your nose with the lavender-scented linen, you're not just tending to a runny nose, you're maintaining your standing, you're signalling refinement, you're performing hygiene with all the delicacy of a court dance. The next day, your handkerchief is missing. You search your apron pocket, your sleeve, your book satchel, gone. Panic rises, slow but certain, because in this household, a missing handkerchief isn't just carelessness, it's a breach of etiquette, an absence that whispers something is off. You'll be expected to explain. You consider borrowing one from your cousin, but each cloth is marked, and the initials would give you away. Even worse would be using nothing at all. A sniff without a handkerchief is a declaration of chaos. At breakfast you sit unusually still, avoiding your nose entirely. Your aunt eyes you across the table, her gaze drifting to the empty place at your cuff. Her lips purse, and a silent note is made. After the meal you're handed a replacement, not a fine one, no lace, no embroidery, just a coarse cotton square, soft from use and slightly frayed at the corners. A punishment cloth, if you're being honest. A signal to those in the know that you've broken form. Later that day in town, you keep it balled in your palm, embarrassed by the lack of elegance. You notice the other women's handkerchiefs, how some tuck theirs into reticules lined with velvet, how others pull them from clean pockets with graceful fingers and quiet rustles. One girl sneezes into hers and immediately sprays rose water after, not for herself, but for anyone who might have been near. You feel your own cloth growing damp. By the time you return home, your aunt has prepared a lecture. Not loud, just disappointed. A lady's handkerchief is her barrier against the world, she says, folding your spare with a practiced flick. Never forget that. You don't. That evening you launder the replacement cloth yourself, not in the household tub but privately, with a teacup of hot water and a scrap of soap. You rub gently, careful not to fray it further. Then you hang it on your dressing table knob, hoping the lavender sachet nearby might cover the faint scent of vinegar and failure. As it dries, you reflect on how a scrap of fabric came to mean so much. In the Victorian home, the handkerchief is a weapon, a shield, a symbol. It absorbs more than tears and sneezes. It absorbs judgment. It's passed silently between suitors, waved from train platforms, pressed to lips in moments of distress. And above all, it's watched, always watched. A folded square can say, "I'm still composed." A stained one says, "I've lost control." And a missing one, well, that's as good as shouting. So now you keep 3. One at your wrist, one in your pocket, one under your pillow, just in case. Not because you expect illness, but because in this house, even your sneeze must be civilized. You're sitting near the window, stitching a frayed hem, when your aunt calls out from the hallway, "Let me see your hands." You rise slowly, already knowing what she's really asking. Not about your stitching, not even about the linen. She wants to check your nails. Your fingers are inspected like artifacts. Palms turned, cuticles checked, nails rubbed with a lace handkerchief to see if they bear any secret grime. There is no dirt, but that's not the point. The inspection itself is the ritual. Your hands tell a story of where you've been, what you've touched, and whether or not you deserve to be seen. Fingernails in the Victorian household are not small details, they're character summaries. A girl with ragged cuticles is thought to be anxious. A girl with half moons blackened by coal or ink. Neglectful. And worst of all, a girl with long, untrimmed nails. Animalistic, your aunt once whispered, as if she were describing a creature, not a child. You're sent to the washstand with a pumice tin. Not soap. Pumice. It's stored in a small jar with a cracked lid and feels like powdered stone. You sprinkle it into your palm, add a splash of vinegar water and scrub. Not your hands, though, just the nails. You twist your fingertips into the grit, pressing each one in like a penitent pressing sins into salt. The feeling is unpleasant, but familiar. Afterward you rinse, then pat your hands dry with a towel already damp from someone else's attempt at redemption. Your skin is pink, stinging. The grit hides in your knuckles, but you say nothing. You return to your aunt. She inspects again. This time she nods. But the ordeal isn't over. Next comes the shine. Your cousin retrieves the nail buffer from the drawer. It's a small block wrapped in chamois leather, soft, worn, and slightly greasy from years of polishing. You rub it gently across each nail in circular motions, trying to achieve a dull, uniform gleam. Too much shine is frowned upon, suggests vanity. Too little. Laziness. You aim for modestly luminous. Men, of course, are allowed dirty nails. Your uncles are always smudged with pipe ash or garden soil. Honest labour, he says proudly, scratching his jaw with a thumb stained nearly black. No one questions his cleanliness, but for you, a bit of charcoal beneath a fingernail is a social death sentence. You remember the scandal last year? One of the girls in town arrived at a church picnic with green under her nails. Rumours swirled. She's been in the cellar, they said. Or worse, the privy. She was sent home with a headache and didn't return to school until spring. You take out your embroidery next, letting your hands rest lightly in your lap, palms up. It's not just work, it's proof. Idle hands in this world are suspicious. Dirty hands are damning. But neatly kept hands, those are currency. Because in this house, hygiene is not only about your body, it's about your reputation. You're back at your sewing when you hear it. A sharp tutting from the drawing room. Your aunt again. She's caught your cousin absent-mindedly nibbling at a hangnail. The room falls silent as your cousin's hand is lowered in shame. No words are spoken, but the message is clear. Your body is not yours to fiddle with. Chewing fingernails is considered a form of social decay. If a girl nibbles her nails, she's judged as weak-willed, nervous, possibly dishonest. You've seen it happen. A friend dismissed from her governess's care not for misbehaviour but for having hands like a squirrel. Her name hasn't been spoken since. Your cousin is sent to the pantry for the lemon. Not for tea, for punishment. A wedge is rubbed across her fingertips to sting any open skin and leave a bitter residue. That'll teach her to keep her fingers out of her mouth, your aunt mutters, slicing another wedge for the housemaid, who was caught doing the same the week before. You recall a time when your own nails were bitten to the quick during winter. You were made to wear soft linen gloves for a month, indoors, outdoors, even at meals. To protect your future, your aunt had said ominously, as if marriage prospects could be eroded by a scuffed cuticle. Clean nails are expected to be short, rounded and pale. No paint, no decoration. The idea of polish is foreign here, associated with actresses, foreigners and fast women. Even rose-tinted fingertips are suspect. One girl you knew once used beetroot juice to tint her nails. She was banned from church choir for 2 Sundays. The stain had vanished by the time she returned, but the whispers hadn't. Men's fingers again are exempt. Your uncle's nails are long, often jagged and always visible as he gestures while speaking. He's praised for his earthy honesty. You once dared to ask why the standard was different. Your aunt blinked at you, confused. Because he's a man. Even nail clippings have rules. They must be trimmed over paper, never into a basin, never into the fire. That invites bad luck. Once cut, they're folded into a scrap of newspaper and tossed discreetly. Your cousin once dropped a clipping behind the dresser. She didn't sleep well for a week. And then there's the business of hangnails. Those traitorous little flaps of skin that appear when winter dries the air, and wool gloves rub your fingertips raw. They must not be pulled, only clipped. Clipped with the same shears used for embroidery, then cleaned afterward with a drop of alcohol, or more commonly spit. If your hands bleed, you hide them. Because bleeding isn't seen as pain, it's seen as poor planning. You glance down now at your own fingers. They're sore from stitching, rimmed faintly pink but still whole. You flex them gently and return to your work, knowing full well the scrutiny that waits even in the smallest gestures. In this house, the body must never betray its struggles, and your nails, they're the final line of defence. You're dusting the stair railings when your aunt leans in with a whisper. The neighbours noticed something. You freeze. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because in this house, being noticed is its own kind of crime. It's about scent. Again. Apparently, during yesterday's walk, someone remarked that your cousin carried a hint of vinegar and wool. A harmless comment, perhaps, but not in Victorian society. In this world, smells are silent weapons. They signal everything from class to cleanliness, from emotional state to moral character. And your family, they're determined to win the olfactory war. You're summoned to the linen closet to retrieve the sachets. those fragile bundles of dried herbs wrapped in faded handkerchiefs, lavender, thyme, even crushed mint. They're tucked into pockets, corsets, sleeves, and undergarments. Not to be sniffed, heavens no, but to gently leak their fragrance into the air like a subtle apology. In the parlour, the heavy curtains are sprayed with rose water from a pewter atomizer. Not too much. Just enough to mask the smell of damp velvet and last week's soot. The sofa cushions are beaten with a cane, then dusted with starch and citrus peel. Even the lampshades are wiped with scented vinegar. This isn't cleaning. This is scent camouflage. The truth is, the house is clean enough. But clean doesn't matter if you smell poor. The greatest insult one Victorian woman could hurl at another wasn't about her clothes or posture. It was, she lets herself be known by nose. You've heard stories. One girl from town lost her fiancé because her gloves, never washed, smelled of perspiration. Another was asked not to return to a friend's home after her collar emitted a sour trace. You once saw a woman stop mid-conversation to pull a sachet from her reticule and hold it discreetly to her nose. She claimed a breeze carried in something unfeminine. It was only the baker's apprentice walking past. You know your own scent by now. Linen, starch, a hint of soap, a trace of scalp oil on humid days. You've been taught to recognise it, not to embrace it. And when you notice it, when you really notice it, you're expected to act. The family has a scent hierarchy. The father may carry the smell of tobacco and horse leather. That's seen as masculine, even noble. Your aunt carries the scent of cold cream and beeswax. That's maternal. Your cousin, when properly prepared, smells like bay leaf and camphor. But you must smell like nothing, or better, like restraint. This is why your drawers are lined with lemon peel. Why your nightgown is aired twice a week. Why your shoes are stuffed with cinnamon bark and your hatband rubbed with vinegar. Not because anyone in the house thinks these things actually work, but because not doing them would raise suspicion. Because in a Victorian home, scent is surveillance, and the nose, the most judgmental eye of all. After supper, the entire house seems to lean into the hush of evening, and with it comes the quiet ritual of self-assessment. Not by mirror, not by word, but by smell. You watch as your cousin unlaces her boots with care and bends her nose to them, subtly, pretending she's inspecting the stitching. She frowns, then rises and disappears into the pantry. You know what she's gone to fetch, the drawer of powdered sachets. It's kept with the household ledgers, as if perfume were a kind of currency. Inside are paper packets filled with crushed orris root and powdered rice. They're used sparingly and only when needed. You're allowed 1/2 packet a week for personal use, unless an incident requires more. Like now. Auntie joins her. She doesn't scold. She simply nods, hands her a small corked bottle of violet water, and gestures toward the back hallway, away from the eyes of the men. Because applying scent, like relieving oneself or changing linens, is a thing women must do unseen. You remember your own lessons. Never apply perfume to bare skin. It implies intimacy. Instead, one must scent the underskirt hem, the inside of gloves, the lace collar, places close enough to carry the aroma, but never close enough to seem deliberate. The goal is to smell like virtue, not seduction. Even your bedding is subject to scrutiny. Your pillowcases are spritzed lightly with rose water on Sundays, and your sheets dusted with starch laced with bay leaf. When you're unwell, you're allowed clove and orange peel tucked under your pillow, but only for 2 nights. Any longer, and the smell of spice is considered excessive. Once, during a family visit, your aunt's friend arrived with a scent so rich it clung to the parlour like molasses. Some said she'd used musk. Others murmured about French tinctures. Your aunt simply washed the curtains the next day, in case, the odour lingered. Because lingering scent is dangerous. It invites questions. Why did it stay? Where did it come from? What did it cover? Even the dog is expected to smell of nothing. Once a month, the maid rubs his fur with lemon peel, not because it helps, but because a clean dog reflects a clean house. You return to your room before bed and inspect your own scent like a detective. You lift your sleeves, your collar, you press your nose to your braid. Faint lavender, a trace of starch, and beneath it, your own skin. Still there, still risky. So you rub your hands with a sachet, lay it under your pillow, and climb into bed knowing that if you're ever asked how you keep so fresh, you'll say what all the women do. Oh, I hardly notice it. Because in this house, to acknowledge your own scent is as indecent as leaving your corset unlaced. Better to live in the illusion. Better to believe that if no one smells you, you've done everything right. You're in the nursery now holding the baby. Not yours, of course, your cousin's. A plump little thing with wide eyes and a faint sour milk smell that clings to every fold of her cotton wrap. She gurgles, then frowns, and you know what's coming next. You brace for it. There's a warm squish against your hip, followed by the unmistakable scent that cuts through lavender sachets and starched linen, like a cannonball through lace. The baby has soiled herself. Again. You call softly for the maid, who appears holding the changing cloth, an old square of muslin laid across her arm like a battle flag. But there's no urgency, no rush to fetch soap or water, because in this household, babies are cleaned the way furniture is dusted, lightly, quickly, and with the expectation that they will immediately soil themselves again. The maid reaches into the wicker basket beneath the changing table and pulls out a wipe. Not a disposable sheet or a moist towel, but a well-used square of flannel folded neatly in fourths. She wets it with a small jug of stale water, gives it a shake, and begins the work. There is no powder, no lotion, only this: rag, rinse, repeat. Once wiped, the cloth is shaken out the window, not to dry, but to rid it of crumbs, lint, and whatever else might cling. Then it's folded again, the soiled corner tucked in discreetly, and dropped into a lidded pail already half full with the day's work. The lid doesn't seal well. A wasp once flew in and never came back out. You hand over the child's wrappings. They too are given the sniff test. If the stain is faint and the cloth mostly dry, it will be hung near the stove to air and used again. If not, it's demoted to floor rags, or worse, burned in the ash pit behind the scullery. The baby is rewrapped in a fresh square of cloth, secured with a length of frayed ribbon. The entire process has taken 4 minutes. No soap, no fuss. Just enough cleanliness to declare effort, not enough to encourage waste. You've heard wealthier homes use sponges soaked in diluted wine, or even scented cloths with imported oils. But not here. Here, hygiene is governed by thrift and silence. The child doesn't cry. She knows this rhythm, and so do you. The family has a rotating stack of baby cloths, perhaps 20, all cut from discarded nightgowns or bed sheets. No one refers to them as diapers. They're called binds, as if the goal were containment rather than comfort. Once a week, the whole stack is boiled in the same cauldron as the underthings, and no one speaks of it. You once saw a maid drop one. She stepped on it rather than let anyone see. That cloth never returned to the stack, because in this household even babies must be discreet. Their messes aren't forgiven, they're hidden. Later that evening you find yourself tasked with folding the fresh binds. They've just finished drying over the kitchen clothesline, stiff from sun and starch, though the faint shadow of their previous use still lingers. Not visually, those stains have been scoured out, but in your mind, you know where each one's been. Each cloth is folded twice, then again, until it forms a small flat square, like a napkin at a formal dinner. Presentation matters, even here. Your aunt believes a well-folded bind reflects a well-ordered home. She's not wrong. These cloths are inspected more often than the baby. You place them in the nursery drawer stacked in rows, with the newer ones at the top. Not because they're cleaner, but because they're softer. The older ones, thinned from use, scratch at tender skin, and are only brought out when the rest have gone through their cycle. The drawer smells faintly of soap, vinegar, and something older, something like time. You close it gently. Later, as the baby fusses again, you reach for a fresh cloth, only to find your cousin already tending to her, the pail beside her nearly full. She moves quickly, efficiently, as if wiping a spill from a table. She doesn't coo. She doesn't pause. Her hands are steady, her face unreadable. When she finishes, she ties off the cloth with a practiced twist and slips the soiled one into the pail. She presses the lid down firmly this time. You glance inside and catch a flash of something pink. Not blood, just the print from an old nightdress. Roses now stained a darker red. It was one of your grandmother's garments once, transformed now into the final layer between a baby and the world. There's a poetry to it, a sad one. You think back to something your aunt said long ago. The first thing a child learns is shame, quiet, daily, folded between the legs. You didn't understand it then. You do now. Here, hygiene isn't about purity. It's about inheritance. Every cloth, every wipe, every wash is part of a cycle passed down from woman to woman, bound together by silence and boiling water. Even the baby who cannot speak already participates. She knows the cold shock of a wet cloth. She knows the way her cries go ignored if the water is scarce or the fire low. She knows that being clean is not the same as being comfortable. And so, the ritual continues. The cloths are folded, the pail is emptied, the child is wrapped, and the shame, soft, quiet, and ever-absorbent, is passed down again. It's a Friday afternoon, and the sun streams low through the lace curtains, illuminating the parlour with a golden glow that somehow makes everything look more honest, and more cruel. That's when your aunt notices the spot. Nor on the floor, nor on the curtains, on your apron, a stain. Just there, near the hem, faint, brown, crusted over at the edges. Could be gravy, could be tea, could be anything. But in this house, it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it's there, and visible. Your aunt's face tightens, not in rage, in disappointment. A stain to her is not simply mess, it's a message, one you've sent out into the world without permission. Fetch the salt, she says quietly, not even looking at you. You obey. The stain ritual begins. In the kitchen, the maid readies the usual arsenal. A saucer of salt, a chipped bowl of milk, a dull-bladed butter knife, a hard-bristled toothbrush that's long since been repurposed for cloth rather than teeth. It's all laid out like a surgeon's tray. No talking, no distractions. You kneel on the flagstones and lay your apron flat, smoothing it out with slow hands. You begin by scraping, not rubbing, scraping with the blunt knife, lifting whatever surface grit might come free. Then the salt pressed into the fabric with a small circular motion. The salt must draw the sin out, as your aunt once put it. After a moment, the cloth is dipped in milk, skimmed cool and scrubbed with the toothbrush, each stroke counted softly under your breath. You don't know why you count. You just do. Everyone does. Maybe because if you scrub too long, the fabric thins. Too short, the stain remains. There's something both ancient and absurd about it. You remember your cousin, once caught with an ink blot on her cuff. She cried as she scrubbed, not because she feared punishment, but because the ink wouldn't lift. For 3 days she kept her sleeves rolled down even in the heat, because in this household a stain is a story you didn't mean to tell, and stains come in many forms. Tea is the most forgiven, ink less so. Blood is barely spoken of. Grease, ironically, is the worst. It implies slovenliness, distraction, a woman who's not paying attention. Your apron stain? Possibly from the roast drippings, which means it happened at the table, which means others might have seen it, which means shame, and so you scrub. The salt grates your knuckles, the milk smells faintly sour, the toothbrush handle is sticky with old starch, but you keep going, because if the stain doesn't lift, the garment must be rewashed. If that doesn't work, it must be cut down into cloths, and if that fails, if it's truly ruined, it's burned. Garments are not allowed to decay in silence. They must either return to form or disappear. The stain on your apron begins to fade, not vanish, but fade. You work it until your fingers ache and your knees feel every groove in the stone floor, because in this house there's no such thing as a harmless blot, only signals, readable by all, and you've learned to make yours disappear. By the time you rise, apron still damp, your hands are trembling slightly, not from exertion, but from the sheer pressure of knowing that the smallest oversight in this household can become a social sin. You hang the apron by the stove, the old iron one that never cools, and watch the fabric darken, then lighten as it dries. You hope the mark won't reappear. Sometimes they do, like ghosts, especially the stubborn ones. Oil, gravy, sweat. They vanish in wetness, only to return the next morning like unwelcome guests at breakfast. Your aunt doesn't inspect the cloth again. She doesn't need to. She trusts that you followed the method. If the stain remains, you'll know what to do next. That's the rule. The expectation. Quiet compliance. No excuses. Later you step into the sewing room, where your cousin sits hunched over a shirt collar, gently picking away at a yellowish line near the neckline. Sweat, the most human of stains, and the most taboo. In polite society, perspiration simply doesn't exist. And yet every collar in this house has borne the ghost of it. She's using a slice of lemon, fresh, carefully halved, dabbing it along the fabric with slow, rhythmic pressure. The acid eats at the discoloration, lifting it as though peeling shame from skin. She works in silence, mouthing a rhyme under her breath. It's one you've both known since childhood. Lemon for the line, salt for the spill, milk for the mark, and soap for the will. It was first recited to you by a governess who'd once worked in a duchess's home, a woman who said a lady's reputation could be measured by the state of her napkins. You thought she was joking. She wasn't. Next to your cousin lies a stack of discarded cuffs and collars, yellowed at the edges. Some will be trimmed and resewn into new seams. Others will become patches or rags. None will be wasted, but all will bear judgment. Because in this home, hygiene is not only about scent or stain, it's about control, and control is everything. You remember the tale of Great Aunt Fanny, who once slapped a maid for bringing her a towel that smelled faintly of boiled carrot, not because it was unclean, but because it betrayed a lack of separation. Kitchen cloths were never to be washed with table linens. The house remembers these crimes, even when the people do not. Stains are not just physical marks. They are signs of boundaries crossed. The wrong towel, the wrong soap, the wrong bowl. One mistake, and your body tells a story you didn't mean to share. Back in the scullery, the cook's helper is scrubbing the floor with vinegar and sand. She hums as she works. Her rag once belonged to your mother, a petticoat worn thin with age and punishment. Now it grinds against stone and dirt, reabsorbing the house's silence. Tomorrow, someone else will make a mess. Tomorrow, someone else will kneel on the cold floor, and tomorrow they'll whisper that same rhyme, hoping the lemon works. Because here, the true battle isn't against dirt. It's against being noticed. You wake earlier than usual, stirred not by light, but by smell. A sweetness, cloying and sharp, like rotting fruit left too long in a bowl. You know that smell. Everyone in the house does. It's the hair tonic. And today is wash day. Not for clothes, not for linens, for you. Victorian hygiene may seem rigid, but here's the truth they don't print in etiquette manuals. Bathing the whole body was often treated as a weekly inconvenience. Daily washing, reserved for the face, hands, and delicately stated personal areas. Anything beyond that required planning, permission, and a strong constitution. You descend to the back scullery, already steamy. The tub, oval, shallow, tin, rests before the fire like a sleeping beast. Water has been heating since dawn in blackened kettles. The maid pours in the third one now, carefully tempering it with cold drawn from the hand pump. The floor is scattered with towels, a stiff bristled brush, a bar of yellow soap, and that bottle, amber glass, tightly stoppered. You undress with the curtain drawn, though modesty here is more about protocol than privacy. Everyone in the house has seen someone else bathed at some point. The awkwardness isn't in nudity, it's in who holds the brush. Today your aunt will supervise. That's a kindness. Last time it was the housemaid, and she scrubbed as though cleaning a rug. You lower yourself into the water slowly, wincing as the heat finds the raw patches behind your knees. Then comes the soap, thick, waxy. It smells faintly of beef tallow and lemons, though neither scent masks the grit. Victorian soap was made from rendered animal fat and lye. When new, it's hard as stone. When used, it flakes like old plaster. Your aunt rubs it across your back in hard strokes, not circles, lines, always lines. There's a method. You don't scrub dirt, she reminds you, you lift it. But it doesn't feel like lifting, it feels like penance. Your scalp is next. The amber bottle is unstoppered with a hiss. The scent hits like spirits and roses, though the roses died long ago. Bay rum, vinegar, quinine. Who knows what's in this one? You lean forward as your aunt pours a capful along your part. The liquid seeps down, stinging your eyes, slicking your hair to your skull. Victorians believed strongly in scalp stimulation. To awaken the follicles, they'd say. And so begins the brushing. Short, vicious strokes with a boar bristle brush that could raise the dead. You grip the sides of the tub. You dare not cry out, not because of pain, but because that would imply weakness, and weakness is unsanitary. You think of the ad for Dr. Dunham's violet bloom hair elixir you once saw pasted near the grocer's. A woman smiling with locks that gleamed like coal. She didn't look like this. She wasn't coughing from vinegar fumes. The brushing continues as if your scalp were being polished for inspection. You imagine a speck of dandruff escaping and drifting down, like a snowflake. Unacceptable. Unforgivable. Your aunt would notice. She always does. Finally the cloth, one for face, one for limbs, and one, coarser, stained for everywhere else. You do that part yourself, quietly, always last, always under the water. This is not a bath. It's a ritual, and like all rituals, it ends with silence. The water's gone cold by the time you rise, knees knocking against the tin, skin red and streaked with soap lines. You shiver not just from the draught, but from the sense that this is the cleanest and most exposed you'll be all week. The maid returns with a warmed flannel, rough with age, and you wrap it around yourself like armour. Outside, the house is waking. Somewhere upstairs, a coal scuttle is being emptied. On the landing, boots are lined up in silent military rows. But here, in the scullery, you drip. Drying is its own ordeal. No rubbing, only pressing. The towel must blot, not abrade. Too much motion, and the skin flushes, an unbecoming sign of exertion. The idea always is effortlessness. You must emerge from the bath as if you'd merely always been that clean, as if no heat or labour or awkward exposure was required. Then the powders, First, the alum. Dusty, astringent, it's patted into creases. Behind the knees, beneath the arms, between the toes. Your aunt swears by it, says it keeps the sourness at bay. You don't question it. You just obey. Next comes starch. Not for laundry, but for you. A fine white rice powder stored in a small carved ivory box. It smells faintly of violets. You dip a puff into it and dust your neck, shoulders, even the backs of your hands. It dries the skin and masks anything that might bloom again too soon. Only now, almost an hour later, do you dress. Undergarments first, freshly boiled and ironed flat. The drawers are scratchy with starch, the chemise stiff and square. Then the corset, bone, laced, adjusted with a frown, and over it all the illusion, a pale day dress with fine trim, and no hint of the battle that just occurred beneath it. You catch your reflection in the scullery's fogged mirror, a girl who looks composed, polished, scented faintly of citrus and camphor. No one will know she cried when the vinegar hit her scalp. No one will know she flinched at the chill. You step back into the hallway, the polished floorboards clicking beneath your shoes. Your aunt doesn't look up from her ledger as you pass, but she does speak. You've remembered behind the ears, I trust. You nod. She doesn't need to inspect. She trusts the process. Behind you, the scullery door closes. The bathwater is still there, cooling, streaked with floating hairs, bubbles clinging to the rim. The maid will drain it soon, toss the rags into the pot for boiling, and scrub the basin with salt. The ritual resets, and you will try not to sweat, because nothing undermines cleanliness like proof that the body lives. Later that evening you will sit in the parlour, hands folded, hair combed flat. You will sip tepid tea and pretend you've always been pristine, that your body never flaked, that your scalp never stung, that hygiene in this house is effortless. But beneath the starch and citrus, your skin knows better, and it itches. You've spent years mastering the art of appearing clean, but tonight is different. It's a dinner party, not just any dinner. A full table of 12, complete with visiting cousins from Bath, a stern aunt from Surrey, and a gentleman whose moustache alone could pass judgment. The house is in chaos, but silent chaos. Everything hums beneath the surface, and that's precisely how it must look. Immaculate on top, turmoil tucked underneath. The preparations start not in the kitchen, but in the bathroom cabinet. Because for Victorian hosts, hygiene was not simply a matter of washing. It was about deception. You don't clean yourself to be clean. You clean yourself to appear untouched by the dirt of living. You begin with the teeth. Tooth powder, not paste, and certainly not with a brush. That's still considered a bit radical. Instead, you use a bit of linen cloth. Wrap it tight around your index finger. Dip it into a tin of brownish-grey powder made from chalk, charcoal and powdered cuttlefish. It smells oddly minty, thanks to the addition of dried peppermint leaves ground into dust. You scrub in slow circles, no blood, no mess. Spitting is undignified, so you dab instead. One lace-edged handkerchief folded into quarters, used only for the mouth. You'll discard it quietly later. Then the nails. Fingernails must be short, rounded, and pale, not pink. Pink suggests circulation. Circulation suggests labour. So you buff, lightly, with a paste made from beeswax and lemon juice. A fine cloth does the rest. No clippers here. Those are tools. Tools are for people who work. Behind you, the room is filling with steam from the iron heating by the fire. A maid is pressing the tablecloth with lavender water so that even the crease smells genteel. You lift your arms and sniff. Just once. Still acceptable. Still dry. But just in case, you dab a drop of lavender oil under each arm. Then a little under your chin. Not too much. You want to suggest freshness, not perfume. Perfume is vulgar unless it's French and bought in Bond Street. Then comes the final trial, the gloves. You slide your hands into them, soft kid leather, pearl-coloured and freshly whitened with chalk powder. If there's any trace of dampness, the gloves will stick. If your nails are uneven, they'll catch. If your hands are not powdered, they will leave stains inside the glove, which will be your secret shame for weeks. But tonight, the gloves slip on like silk. You are ready. Outside, the table is set. The crystal is polished. The soup is boiling. Somewhere a maid is scrubbing her nails with lemon because she touched a turnip too long and the scent lingers. Hygiene is not just about your body. It's about your impact. Everywhere you walk, sit, speak, or sip. Your cleanliness must follow you like perfume. Unseen, unspoken, but utterly essential. And you've learned it all. From earwax remedies to starching your chemise, from not wrinkling a napkin to breathing. Through your nose during chamber pot hour. You've lived the whole spectrum. But tonight, your only task is to appear perfect. And you do. From the shine of your hair to the silent flecks of your gloved fingers, everything suggests a life untouched by sweat, soil, or suffering, even if you've spent the whole day cleaning yourself out of the house. You take your seat at the dinner table just as the clock chimes 7. 12 courses lie ahead. 12 courses where posture must remain precise, laughter soft and cutlery silent. But above all, you must stay dry. The fire crackles nearby, the roast steams, and somewhere between the oysters and the mutton, your underarms begin to prick, not with sweat, with fear of sweat. Because Victorian hygiene wasn't about eradicating filth, it was about concealing it. The greatest insult wasn't that you were dirty, it was that anyone might know. So you sit still, you take shallow breaths, you sip your wine without wetting your lips too much, lest someone notice a smudge on the rim. At your side, the gentleman from Bath dabs his brow with a cambric square, one embroidered with his monogram, naturally. He smells faintly of bergamot and shaving soap. You wonder how long he stood in his chamber that morning, choosing which scent masked sweat without suggesting he'd ever had to. Across the table, your cousin drops her napkin. As she bends, you catch sight of her chemise. Starched, yes, but with the faintest halo of yellow beneath the arm. A stain. A betrayal. You look away quickly. You will never mention it. The meal crawls forward. You smile when required, laugh only when safe, and when the final spoonful of trifle vanishes, you excuse yourself with grace and glide down the corridor to your chamber. Once inside, you bolt the door. The moment the lock clicks, you exhale. Deeply. You peel off the gloves, one finger at a time. Inside, your palms are damp, they always are. You remove the dress carefully, turning it inside out so any damp patches face in. You check the chemise, still white, still respectable. Then, standing by the candlelight, you raise your arms and smell. Nothing. You have won. Tomorrow, the process will begin again. Boiling the linens, brushing the hair, deciding whether to use the alum or risk the clove oil again. You'll repeat the rituals because in this house, like every decent Victorian home, there is no such thing as being clean. There's only the constant act of appearing clean. And now you understand the truth. Cleanliness isn't about purity. It's about performance. The glove, the starch, the lavender water, the chalk. All stage props. And you're the lead. The curtain never really falls. Not in this house. Not in this era. But for now, under this candle's gentle glow, you allow yourself a small, secret indulgence. You scratch your scalp, not too hard, just enough, and smile. So now, the gloves are off, the corset's unlaced, and the water in the basin has gone, still. The house is hushed to its quiet nightly murmur. Floorboards settling, coals sighing in the hearth, and a single clock ticking away the last remnants of the day. You've survived it. Not just the dinner, or the bath, or the powder, but the whole elaborate dance of Victorian hygiene. A world where the illusion of cleanliness mattered more than the comfort of it. Where starch and soap were symbols. Where a single misplaced hair could spark gossip, and a faint sourness under the arms could ruin a season's reputation. And yet, within that world you found your rhythm. You learned how to move through each room like a ghost of lavender and citrus. How to keep your gloves dry, your chemise spotless, your hair brushed just so. You adapted, you endured, and that's something quietly extraordinary. Because even amid the starch and vinegar, the tooth powder and tepid sponge baths, you remained human, flawed, soft, real. And that softness, it never truly went away. It just hid behind the starch. So now, as your head sinks into the pillow and the shadows lengthen across your ceiling, let yourself drift. Let the rules melt away. No more alum, no more starch, no more polite dabs with perfumed handkerchiefs. Just breath, stillness, quiet. Let your skin breathe. Let your story rest. And know that for all their rules, their rituals, their rigid ways, the Victorians never had anything quite as precious as this. A moment to simply be. No judgment, no powder, only peace.